Starback, Director of the Duke Office of Postdoctoral Services. And today's session is the first session in our Spring F32 series. Today's topic is an intro to F32 awards, and we are welcoming our good friend Stephanie Freel, who is the Associate Director of Outreach and Mentorship at the Duke Office for Clinical Research. She's going to give an overview of the F32 award mechanism, including positioning oneself for success, responding to core review criteria, and writing to promote a successful application. And Stephanie brought lots and lots of handouts with her. If you didn't get one, we'll email out the links after the session. So Stephanie, when she was with the Duke Office for Faculty Mentoring, developed the K-Club and Faculty Independence programs. And she now oversees doctoral study planning, grant review, and mentorship programs for faculty, postdocs, fellows, residents, and study staff conducting clinical research. So Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us today.
So just another little thing about me. So right now I work in clinical research, but I've never actually, as an investigator, done clinical research. I come from a basic science background. I worked as a grant writer in Sally Kornbluth's lab for a few years. So what I'm talking about today is really broadly applicable, whether you're doing clinical research, whether you're doing basic research. We're talking about the F32s. And the F32 mechanism from NIH is supported fairly broadly across a lot of the institutes and centers. So whatever kind of research you do, they're likely to support it. So I also wanted to say that we could talk about kind of crafting grants for days, and I've tried to digest it down into about 45 minutes, but I really want to talk about the questions and the things that are interesting and important to you all. So please jump in and ask questions as we go. If I'm running through a topic and I don't see that you have a question, wave vigorously or stand up or just shout out, that's fine with me. And we'll try to get through whatever we can. Molly, will the slides be available if we don't happen to get through?
Yes, if you want to be, we can send them out to everyone who signed up.
That would be perfect. So don't worry about missing anything. If we have a robust conversation and we don't get through all the slides, we'll make sure that you have those if you need them. And I'm always available for questions. So in the handouts, if you were able to get one, there's one handout that talks about the services that the Office of Clinical Research does regarding study planning and grant review. And my card is there, so feel free to reach out if you want to. So today we're talking about F32s, and we're going to start with something pretty easy. How many of you are postdocs? How many of you are in your first postdoc? So a lot of you. Okay, all right. F32s are a great mechanism for investigators who want some support during their postdoctoral time. Okay, I'm going to use the keyboard. Whoops. That's all right. This works. It works. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the F32 to get in the right mind space for writing one, the challenges and the benefits of applying, and then some tips for successful application. All right, so the purpose of the F32 award. Worked with several investigators, and typically if you ask them, what is an F32 for? They'll say, well, it's to fund my postdoc, right? To fund the research I'm doing as a postdoc. If you look at the NIH FOA, so this is the funding opportunity announcement. This is the big announcement that NIH puts out that says, now taking applications for the F32, excuse me. What they say that the F32 is about is to ensure that a diverse pool of highly trained scientists is available. And they want that to cover a diversity of scientific disciplines. And the end goal of that is to address the nation's biomedical, behavioral, and clinical research needs. NIH has recently reiterated their dedication to the basic scientists, so don't read this as being exclusive of studies that help us understand the fundamental knowledge of how our bodies and our cells work. So why does it matter what you think an F32 is for? Okay, it matters because it impacts the way that you talk about what you do within your application. So we'll walk through those in my animations. I didn't set them up correctly. So if you're talking about the common knowledge for the application itself, it's to pay for my research. And now the application itself, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of the NIH, you're really asking them for an investment in you as an investigator, which is a very different thing to write about. Why is that important? Because what you think of the application and the process and the award itself, it influences your negotiation behavior. And let's face it, a grant application is really a fairly rudimentary beginning of a negotiation. So I have a few models that I'd like to describe here for you, and those of you that either have or are familiar with children, these will be very familiar to you. And unfortunately, those of you that do not have children will also find these very familiar models. So if you're coming from the perspective that this is just to fund my research, you have this negotiation model, and I call this the toddler model. Pretty much what you're saying is, I see that you have candy, and I want some. Please give it to me. Okay, so basically who you're talking now, you have me, you have you, which is your sponsor, and you have the candy, which is your research funding. Okay, if you explore that a little bit more in depth and you're thinking a little bit more about what NIH wants out of the deal, you adopt something more like the kindergartner model. And this is great because you're really saying, you have candy, I want candy, and if you give it to me, I'll do something you like, right? So that's a little bit better. Now we've got me and we've got you, which is the sponsor. We've still got the research funding, and now you have some sort of vague promise of a positive outcome, right? What we'd like to get to by the end of today's discussion is something more like the third grader model. I don't know if any of you are familiar with third graders. They're kind of know-it-alls in a sense. So basically what they're saying is, you know, I know it's important to you that the house is clean, and I really want to clean my room, but I don't have enough energy, and guess what? Candy gives me energy, and if you give me that candy, I can get that room clean and we will both be happy, right? So now you've got me, you've got you, the sponsor, you've got the rationale for the candy, not just, hey, give me money, but here's what that money gives you that you want, and a very specific positive outcome for the sponsor. That's what we want to do with our application. We want to tie all of those elements together so you're presenting them with a package that they want to invest in. So, what's the challenges for the F32? One of the challenges is that the individual fellowships are on the decline. So here you show over a course of years, up until 2013, which was the most recent data that I could find, the federal fellowships is this dark blue line at the bottom. So there's never been a ton of them relative to all of the other funding support for postdocs, but they're decreasing. So there are fewer of them now. And what that does is it maintains a high level of competition. So they're very competitive. For the past several years, we've been sitting anywhere between 24 and 28% success rates across all of the F32s. Okay, so that means that this is an endeavor that can be challenging and can be very frustrating, and in the end, after many months of preparation, you may not have anything. So why do we want to do that? Okay, it's added value. So the assumption if you're going to write an F32 is that you plan to establish an independent research career. So F32s are for folks who plan to be fairly traditional research PIs. If that's not the plan for you, there are other ways for you to pursue your career, and the F32 is probably not a worthy investment of your time for you. You know, if you want to, that's great, but you may not get as much out of it as you really would desire to. So now we're going to revisit the purpose of the F32. It's a financial investment in your future productivity towards solving a major health problem. So when you think about that added value, once that initial investment is made, we know psychologically it's much easier to continue throwing money at something once you've had an investment made. And that's true for individuals, it's true for institutions, it's true for the NIH. If they've invested in you and you're productive, then it's more easy for them in the future to invest in you again. And here's some of the data that shows this. This is a little bit older, but it's the most recent data that I could find. So former fellows, when they go to apply for NIH research awards later on, within 10 years of completing their fellowship, 45.5% apply, and 30.6% receive those fellows, or receive that additional funding. Now, to compare that, other postdoctoral fellows that have not gotten the F32s, they go on to, only 28.6 go on to apply for research funding, and only 16.9% go on to get that funding. So it really does have an impact in your ability to get your independent research career started, at least with NIH. As of 2 years ago, Duke had roughly 3% of all active F32s, and they were spread across a lot of the NIH Funding Centers. So you can see that there's a lot of different kinds of research being represented here. So how do we overcome those challenges? First thing you want to think about is, how can I improve my odds? This is a competition. I'm going into a pool with a lot of other people that are at my same stage of career. They're very good scientists, they have great ideas, they have good mentorship. How do I myself put myself at the top of that pile and improve my odds of being funded? And the first thing you want to do is understand the funding mechanism. And we talked a little bit already about understanding what the F32 is about. So what else do we need to understand? F32s are essentially training and career development awards. They're not mostly about your research at all. They're mostly about that investment in you. They're going to be concerned about your candidate and training activities. They're going to be concerned about your research strategy. And they're going to be concerned about the mentorship that you're going to get that's going to enable you to be successful. And what you need to tell them at the end of this story that you're going to write, which is your application, is, here are my fundamental deliverables. Here is how this proposed activities are going to lead me to an important career. Here's how the proposed research is going to promote NIH and the funding center goals. And then here's how my career goal itself is going to fill that important investigator niche. So remember that this is all about building a diverse pool of investigators that can address our important health needs. You need to tell them what's your piece of that pie and why it's important to them. Because it's not a really good investment for them if they're putting money into developing a career that we already have several other investigators that work in that intellectual space. Okay, this is a little bit difficult to read, but basically the point is that there's a lot of pieces to this application, and they all need to work together to tell the story of who you are, what you want to be, what you're planning on doing, and why it's important. These are the new page limits that were just issued from NIH. The main differences that I've noticed here are that they're giving a single page limit of 6 pages to this whole background and goals for fellowship training, whereas they used to break it out fairly specifically as how many pages were for the training, how many pages were for the goals, how many pages described yourself. So now they've kind of bundled that. So how do we approach this, all of this information? I think the first thing that you're going to do is think about the background and goals for fellowship training. Address that first. Sit down and think, okay, who is it that I want to be as an investigator? One thing that can help, because we don't think in this space very often as scientists, is I have provided a handout for you that we've developed that can help guide you through that thought process, to help really define specific career development objectives and goals that you can then transfer into your F32 application. Start there. Why do we start there instead of starting into talking about our research? Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Well, you just said that the whole goal of the application is not necessarily about, or mostly about your research, it's about training. And they want to invest in you and your future. So it's very important to know what that future is and get that concrete as a foundation for the application.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly right, because it is all about you and your career. And importantly, that when you get to write your research, it needs to feed into those career goals And if you haven't sat down and thought about what your career is going to be, what those goals are going to be, you can't articulate in your research strategy how that project is going to fulfill those goals, right? So you don't want to start by outlining your research. You want to start by outlining your goals so that you can fairly organically weave those sections together. And how do we know what to say? So the best thing that you can do for this or any kind of grant application is to read through your funding opportunity announcement. These are burdensome documents. They're pages upon pages upon pages. But they're written by the program officers at NIH or whatever funding institution that you're seeking funding from. And they really detail not only what the purpose of the application is, what kind of resources will be made available to you as far as support for your salary, support for your research itself, but they also tell you exactly what reviewers are looking for and exactly what they expect you to come out of it with. So if you read the funding opportunity announcement for F32s, you'll see that they want you to come out of this with a strong technical foundation. They want you to come out with the ability to conceptualize research. They want you to have a bunch of first author publications. They would like you to see you have community interaction. And this is a pretty new direction. So over the past 5 years, NIH has really emphasized and enhanced their focus on us as scientists getting out and interacting with the community that we serve. So if you can speak specifically to how your career goals are going to help you become a stronger community partner, that will help you in your application. Very importantly, they want you to see that you're going to transition to independence. They don't want to see that this is one grant that's going to lead to another grant that's going to lead to another grant that are all within the same mentored space. And usually they won't even allow you to do that. At the end of this, you might move on to another mentored grant, something like a K, which is more for faculty, or you might move directly into a research project grant. But they want to see that effort and that move towards independence. And research relevance, of course. They want to see how what you're doing fits into the landscape of everything that's going on in research in your field. So once you understand the mechanism, how else do you improve your odds? You know your audience. And this is true for grants, it's true for papers, it's true for presentations. If you know who you're speaking to and why they are receiving the information, then you can communicate much better what they're going to get out of it and what you're going to get out of it. You're moving towards that third grader model, right? You can articulate what that relationship is that you have with the audience who's looking at your application. So how do you know for F32s who your audience is going to be? Most of the time you can find it, I would say fairly easily, but that's not the right term. It's readily available. It's not always that easy to find, but it's on the NIH Center for Scientific Review website. They publish all the rosters for all of their study sections. For fellowships, the fellowships are usually reviewed in a study section that is different from the study section that's reviewing RPGs, like R01s. But they're still independent from the funding centers. This is different from career development mechanisms where the funding centers evaluate them themselves. So here you have a study section of scientists who's reading your application, giving it a score based on how impactful they think you and your career development plan and your research is going to be. But they're not deciding whether or not to fund you. They're giving you a score based on scientific and career development merit. Those go forward to the funding center that would fund your type of research. And that's where decisions are made. However, those decisions are made with a great deal of influence based on those numbers from the scientific review session. So understand that you've got multiple audience that are looking at your application for different reasons. For the study sections, this is the scientific review for scientific merit and career development. You can find it on the Center for Scientific Review NIH website under the study sections area. Okay, and what you will find there is a list of people that sit on a study section. You will not know who will be assigned your application as a primary reviewer. cannot find out that information. As applicants, we are not allowed to communicate with study section members at all. If you do, they have to recuse themselves from the evaluation process. So you don't want to try to do that in any case. But you'll find out sort of the spread, so you'll know whether or not you're talking to a pool of very basic mechanistic scientists, whether you're talking to a pool of translational scientists. You'll understand if it's a mix of people. At what level do we need to start telling our story? Can we dive right into biochemical pathways, or do we really need to set the stage more for the significance of the research in a public health population? I would say take that step back and start from as common ground as you can. So start with a broader picture and then narrow it down so that you can engage all of those reviewers, because they all have equal scoring power for your application, whether or not they're your primary or secondary reviewer. So how do you know what they're looking for? Review criteria is public knowledge. So it's posted on NIH websites, again, readily available, not always the easiest thing to find. However, it's also included in that funding opportunity announcement. So if you read through that, it will tell you exactly what the reviewers are asked to look for and score you. This one is pulled from the F32 FOA, and what you'll see is you're going to be evaluated as an applicant. Your sponsors, meaning your mentors and your co-mentors, will be evaluated. Your research training plan, so what you plan to do is engage your career to train yourself, will be evaluated. Training potential, so those are two separate things. Here's what I'm going to do to become the investigator I want to be. Here's who I already am that's going to enable me to get the most out of that training. Those are two separate things that you're being scored on. Institutional environment and commitment. So they want to know that you as a postdoc here at Duke have the support that you need from your institution to be successful. Because you can have the best plan in the world, but if nobody with power is on board, you're going to fail. So they want to have communications from your mentors, from your departments that say, we support this person, we think they're better than sliced bread, and we're going to help them build the career that they need to build. Okay, more about knowing your audience. That second review, so you've got your first scientific and career development merit review in the study section. Those, if you get a great score, will be pushed forward, recommended for funding to the center itself. And NIH has 27 different institutes and centers that are usually fairly disease-focused, with the exception of a few of them like NIGMS, is General Medical Sciences, NCATS, which I think has recently changed what they're called, is the Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, so it's a little bit broader, not disease-focused. Know who is likely to be the funding organization for the kind of research that you do.